Did you know one of history's greatest orators was killed because he trusted a 19-year-old kid? Yeah. Today we're diving into the high-stakes drama of late Republican Rome, where words could get you killed, alliances were as stable as reality TV friendships, and power didn't come from the ballot box. It came from knives, speeches, and signatures. This is the story of Cicero, the philosopher, politician, and man who thought he could save a dying republic with nothing but eloquence. Spoiler, he couldn't. It's also the story of Octavian, Caesar's teenage heir, who played the long game better than anyone, used his dad's murder as political fuel, and basically outmaneuvered everyone in a toga. But stick around, because this isn't just a story about ancient Rome. It's a case study in what happens when institutions crumble, when trust breaks, and when politics becomes blood sport, literally. And no, this isn't just history. It's the prequel to the playbook modern power still uses. By the end of this video, you'll understand how the fall of a single senator became a warning, echoing across time, of what happens when truth loses to tactics, when speeches fall flat, and when betrayal isn't the exception, it's the rule. Get ready. Because this isn't just about Cicero's last words, it's about what happens when words lose their power. Picture this. A man standing before the Roman Senate, voice steady, eyes burning with conviction, and words sharp enough to draw blood. That man was Cicero. And the enemy, at least in his eyes, had a name, Mark Antony. Channeling the spirit of Demosthenes railing against Philip of Macedon, Cicero launched his own verbal assault, a series of speeches known as the Philippics. But these weren't just speeches. They were performances. Political grenades. A one-man show trying to stop an empire from sliding into dictatorship. Cicero saw Mark Antony not just as a rival, but as a threat to everything the Republic stood for. Antony wasn't just any power-hungry politician, he was Caesar's right-hand man, with troops, charisma, and a serious ambition problem. So why speak out? Because in Cicero's world, silence was surrender. The Philippics were his last stand, a desperate attempt to turn rhetoric into resistance. In his mind, words could still steer Rome back from the edge. But here's the catch. Rome in 44 BC didn't care much for speeches anymore. It cared about swords, alliances, and who controlled the purse strings. Cicero was playing chess in a bar fight. This is where things get tragically ironic. Cicero, one of the sharpest minds Rome ever produced, was betting on ideals in a game that had stopped using rules. He believed truth still had weight. That you could still win people over with arguments, not armies. And that's what makes him both heroic and heartbreakingly naive. Because words don't win wars. And deep down, Cicero knew it. That's why he pinned all his hopes on a teenage prodigy. After unleashing his rhetorical fury on Mark Antony, Cicero realized he needed more than words. He needed an ally. And who better than the golden boy of the moment? Octavian. 19 years old. Heir to Julius Caesar. Fresh-faced, well-spoken, and most importantly, not yet tainted by the swampy politics of Rome. To Cicero, Octavian looked like a second chance. A reboot of the Republic, now with better branding and less blood. He hoped to mold the young man into a champion of senatorial values, basically, the anti-Antony. Someone who'd defend the old system, with Cicero as his wise mentor pulling strings in the background. But here's where the alarm bells should have started ringing. Octavian smiled. He agreed. He gave Cicero exactly what he wanted to hear. And yet, he never really said anything. The kid was playing his own game. While Cicero was busy scripting speeches and dreaming of a noble revival, Octavian was counting troops, reading Caesar's will, and planning a very different kind of comeback. This wasn't mentorship. It was mutual use. Temporary. Disposable. And it's not like history doesn't warn us. Pop culture is full of doomed duos that looked promising, at first. Obi-Wan and Anakin. Kendall and Logan Roy. Michael Corleone and literally anyone who trusts him. mentor-mentee dynamics that end not with applause, but with betrayal. The tension between Cicero and Octavian is a masterclass in political misreading. One saw a noble mission. The other saw an opportunity. And spoiler alert, one of them ends up with a statue, the other, with his head on a spike. Because when your survival depends on trust, and you pick the wrong person, that's not just a bad move. That's checkmate. And the best way to measure betrayal is by who makes it onto the kill list first. Remember when political grudges were settled with debates? Yeah, Rome was way past that. Enter the proscriptions, a legal-sounding word for what was basically a state-sanctioned kill list. No trial, no jury, no defense. Just names on a board, rewards for heads, and a society that learned real quick not to ask questions. After Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed their uneasy alliance, known as the Second Triumvirate, they didn't waste time with niceties. They needed enemies gone. Fast. So, they did what any self-respecting authoritarian trio would do, made murder efficient. If your name showed up on the list, you weren't just cancelled, you were erased. Your property seized. Your life forfeit. Your friends suddenly, very busy elsewhere. And yes, Cicero made the list. The same man who believed in law, in process, in the power of persuasion, was now being hunted by the very government he thought he was saving. There was no hearing. No rebuttal. Just a price on his head and silence from those who used to cheer him on. It's easy to see this as ancient brutality. But honestly, it hits uncomfortably close to modern tactics. Just swap the swords for smear campaigns, financial ruin, or political exile. The message is the same: step out of line, and you're next. This wasn't just personal vengeance. It was systemic terror. A message carved into marble and shouted from the streets: the Republic is dead, and you'd better fall in line, or else. And Cicero, the master of words, found himself powerless. Not because he'd lost his voice, but because the audience had changed. No one was listening anymore. They were watching their backs. And when the head of Rome's greatest orator ends up nailed to the rostrum, mouth pierced, tongue cut out, it's not just a murder. It's a message. Because when even the voice of the Republic becomes a trophy, what's left of the system that once protected him? After Cicero's brutal death, you might expect the Senate, the proud backbone of the Roman Republic, to rise up in outrage. Demand justice. Defend its own. Yeah, no. That's not what happened. The Senate, once the most powerful deliberative body in the Western world, now looked more like a set piece. Still intact. Still dressed in its fancy robes. Still pretending to matter. But the real power? It had packed its bags and moved elsewhere, into army camps, backroom deals, and handwritten pacts between men with swords. This was the new reality. Rome's political structure was still technically alive, but functionally brain-dead. The rituals remained, the votes, the speeches, the ceremonies, but they were hollow. Like watching a puppet show when you know the strings lead somewhere else. Cicero had hoped the Senate could be a moral compass, a last line of defense. He believed in institutions, in process, in the idea that old structures could still do new work. But Octavian? He saw the Senate for what it had become, a stage. And he knew how to perform. He played the part of the dutiful Roman. Respectful. Measured. Grateful. Let the senators feel important, while he quietly took control elsewhere. Sound familiar? It's the oldest trick in the political playbook. Make them feel like they're in charge while you rewrite the rules behind the curtain. And this isn't just ancient history. Think of modern parliaments or congresses that still meet, still vote, still talk big, but where real decisions are made by a handful of insiders, oligarchs, or generals. The structure survives, but the soul? Gone. Rome didn't fall in a day. It hollowed out from the inside. And by the time anyone noticed, it was already too late. Meanwhile, the real power was on the move, not under the Senate's golden dome, but on the open road. Marching. Organizing. Waiting. Because while the Senate slept, the armies didn't. Hey, Discovers, real quick before we dive back in, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're the kind of person who loves a good story, the real ones, with epic battles, wild mysteries, unforgettable characters, and lessons that still echo today, then this channel is for you. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore history in a way that's curious, smart, and surprisingly fun. Because understanding the past has never been this interesting. While the Senate kept playing politics and pretending everything was fine, the real game had shifted to the battlefield. And at the center of it all? A teenage upstart with a famous last name and a dangerously quiet ambition, Octavian. The showdown came in 43 BC, near the town of Mutina. Mark Antony was besieging the city. The Senate, suddenly remembering it had military authority, or at least liked to think so, sent 2 consuls and Octavian to stop him. The message was clear: Octavian, you want legitimacy? Prove it. Fight for us. So he did. And here's the twist, he won. Antony was pushed back. The consuls? Dead. Oops. And Octavian? Suddenly, he was the only commander still standing. The Senate had gambled, and accidentally handed him the winning hand. Now, this wasn't some grand, noble defense of the Republic. Octavian wasn't there to save democracy, he was there to secure his future. And when the dust settled, he had both the army and the glory. Without wearing a crown, he just earned everything a monarch could want: fame, loyalty, and leverage. It's the classic, reluctant hero act. Like Maximus in Gladiator, except Octavian wasn't reluctant, just strategic. He played the role of humble servant of Rome, all while consolidating power faster than you can say Ave Caesar. And the Senate? Grateful, desperate, blind. They praised him, honored him, tried to keep him close. Too late. The kid they thought they could control had just outmaneuvered them in armor and in politics. Because in Rome, the real coronation didn't need gold. Just victory. And Octavian wasn't done. Far from it. Because how do you win over the soul of Rome? Not with swords. With inheritance. Octavian had already won a battle. Now, he needed to win something far trickier: the people. Enter Caesar's will. Turns out, Julius Caesar didn't just leave Octavian his name, he left him cold, hard cash. A massive fortune, with one major PR catch: Caesar had promised a chunk of that money to the Roman people. Public distributions. A final flex from beyond the grave. So what does Octavian do? He honors it. Every sestertius. Public games, handouts, speeches. Suddenly, he wasn't just Caesar's errand name, he was Caesar's ghost with a wallet. It was political genius. While Antony was still swinging swords and giving angry speeches, Octavian was buying loyalty, legally. No coups, no assassinations, just receipts. This wasn't just inheritance. It was branding. Octavian presented himself as the continuation of Caesar's legacy: generous, firm, beloved. He wrapped himself in nostalgia, populism, and, crucially, money. And the people ate it up. It's not so different from today, really. When modern politicians use the legacy of dead icons, be it Kennedy, Mandela, or even corporate founders, to borrow legitimacy. When they drop names and slogans like currency. Or literally buy influence through donations, favors, and philanthropy, that just happens to come right before an election. Octavian played that game before it even had a rulebook. He turned inheritance into investment. He turned loyalty into a transaction. And he turned Rome into a crowd that cheered not for policy, but for payouts. So now, with military success, popular support, and Caesar's blessing in gold, Octavian stood at the edge of real power. And the question became, why share? Why negotiate with the Senate, with rivals, with anyone, when a signature could do what a sword never could? You'd think the death of Julius Caesar would have taught Rome a lesson about concentrating power in one man's hands. Instead, Rome said, "Let's try 3. In 43 BC, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus did something that hadn't been done since Sulla. They made themselves legally above the law. It was called the Second Triumvirate, and it was exactly what it sounds like: 3 men signing a piece of paper to split control of the Roman world. Not with a handshake. Not with tradition. With ink. On paper, it looked like a pact for stability. Rome was in chaos, enemies were everywhere, and this was presented as the responsible adult decision. But in reality, it was a legalized gang war. They weren't restoring the Republic. They were dividing its corpse. And unlike the old, sneaky political backrooms, this was out in the open. Official. Ratified by law. The Republic hadn't just died, it had been signed away. They even reinstated the Proscriptions. That kill list we talked about earlier? It was back. But now, with state approval and bureaucratic flair. It's the kind of move you'd expect in Game of Thrones, a power-sharing deal that everyone knows won't last, made only to eliminate common threats before turning on each other. Or like The Godfather, when the families make peace, just long enough to reload. And Octavian? He wasn't just signing a pact. He was signing his path to ultimate control. Because while Antony and Lepidus still believed they were equals, Octavian was already planning the next move. The brilliance of the Triumvirate wasn't that it seized power. It's that it made the public think this was stability. That legality equals legitimacy. That paperwork means peace. But Cicero knew better. And his head, still displayed on the rostrum in the forum, mouth silenced, tongue cut out, said everything Rome had lost. Because when tyranny comes wearing a seal and carrying a law book, that's when it's hardest to recognize. Rome didn't fall with a bang. It faded through signatures, speeches, and quiet betrayals dressed up as stability. By the time Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus put their names on that triumvirate agreement, the Republic wasn't under threat. It was already gone. The Senate still met. Laws were still passed. But it was all set dressing, like a stage play where the actors go through the motions, knowing the ending has already been written. And Cicero? He was the last character who believed in the script. He thought institutions could still protect Rome. That ideal still had a chance. That words, if said loudly and bravely enough, could hold the tide. They couldn't. He wasn't killed in battle. He wasn't overthrown. He was eliminated, targeted by a political alliance, murdered with bureaucratic precision, and silenced with ceremonial brutality. Not because he failed, but because he still mattered. His death was a message. The age of speeches was over. The age of silent power had begun. Octavian would go on to become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. But his genius wasn't just in war or manipulation. It was in making people believe they still lived in a republic, even when they didn't. And that's the warning echoing through time. The end of a democracy rarely looks like a battlefield. It looks like routine. It sounds like applause. It's packaged as reform, or security, or restoring order. So maybe the real question isn't why the Roman Republic fell. Maybe it's this. How many republics today are still standing, but only on paper?